brought back pieces of the sets or props that were left behind, and so the Lars Homestead, when it was, it was rebuilt for episode 2, and it's been deteriorating, and so some people brought back pieces of it that had fallen off and so on from Tunisia and some of the other film locations.
Sorry. This I thought was a neat one. You know, we're trying to include things that are not just in the superhuman collector realm. And things like this are neat. You get a piece that's identifiable, nicely displayed, and, you know, within grasp of mere mortals. And this is kind of neat. These are the Death Star pieces that Stephen was speaking to earlier. And this is part of a private collection. Someone who sent these into us as a submission. And what I like about this is the way it's displayed. They've got two nice pieces, nice amount of air around them, gives them a little sense of import, nice glass case from IKEA that you will probably find in nearly every collector's collection, I think, in the US, the famous IKEA Detail. And the die lines around it, the storyboard is really a really nice little display. And that's kind of the more rare Death Star piece with a tower, which
those have turned up again, different scale. A lot of the Death Star pieces come in different scales, and some of the towers can be huge models, and then some smaller, like about a foot high.
And for whatever reason, the towers, well, I guess just because they're much more rare than the other pieces, the towers always seem to command a really good value. So this is a very cool piece. My big thing is creature stuff, and it's just such a great, weird, ugly design. You know, and so yeah, there's a pretty cool example of a blaster. This is would this be Han or Luke's from Empire? So this is the resin version. It's also the same one they had on the Muppet Show when they did that. That's awesome. Yeah. Yes, of course I know. And another great blaster. I think the owner of this might be here somewhere. Found him. He's got a very nice collection of blasters, this among them, Jabba's Palace blaster, if anybody doesn't recognize it. That is a Scout blaster from Return of the Jedi as well. And that is Bosk's gun, speaking of weird and ugly creatures. And speaking of weird and ugly, there is General Maydine's beard.
There's a great story here. So basically, the story on Maydine's beard is that I guess Kenner had started sculpting this action figure before they had cast the part, and they just sculpted this guy with a beard, and he showed up on set without a beard, and then they went to the steward, Fremont, the makeup guy, and said, this guy's got to wear a beard. So if you look at it, the next time you watch the film, there's nothing real about that beard. It's obviously a fake beard.
This is a very fake. But yeah, how many people before today did not know that was a fake beard? Don't be shy. Yeah, that's it.
Put it on Facebook.
Stuart Fremont is your name. Stuart Fremont. So this is kind of neat. My friend Bob Burns, who has an amazing collection of all sorts of film props and memorabilia from many decades and decades of film, stretching all the way back to the old serials and the Wolfman and Universal Pictures and everything like that. Happens to have Darth Vader's cut-off hand and lightsaber as well.
He has a book, doesn't he?
What was that?
Bob has a book out as well. So
Yes.
From Bob's basement.
It came from Bob's basement. He's also got a follow-up that was called Monster Kid Memories that if you want to learn about people who go and reach out and talk with crew members and get to know their idols and things like that, it's a really nice read. So here's another couple of wonderful pieces from Bob's collection. Bob has the good fortune of having known Rick Baker since he was a kid. And after Star Wars, when Rick Baker wrapped up some of his work on the Cantina scene, he gave his friend Bob some absolutely amazing movie props. So this is from a site called StarWarsHelmets.com. And here's a good example of a screen match. That's 2008 and 1979 when the thing was shot. A few little pieces fell off in the meantime, but that's just an absolutely wicked helmet. And here's another, the yellow arrows seem to appear on movie prop fan sites quite often. And it's people going through and saying, okay, this eyebrow is, this eyelid is trimmed a little low on this side. This hole is cut here, this paint is high there, etc., etc. And if you look side to side, that is the move along helmet. So, of all the Stormtrooper helmets to have from A New Hope, I think for me this would be, I mean, that's just great. Absolutely, absolutely. How many times has that been spoofed? So there's another helmet. Is this a Y-wing helmet, Brandon? Do you know offhand? Or is this an X-wing?
Yeah, I would say it could be either actually, because they did a chop and change on the inserts between pilots, so I think there's a possibility. And that differs to the Snow Speeder. The Snow Speeder style is almost directly comparable, but it has a different tinted visor to it, so it has an orange tint.
And there's a few other examples of just nice clean displays, nice wall cases there, some blasters. That's a Return of the Jedi Rebel blaster. I believe that's an ROTJ Stormtrooper blaster. That bottom one, Gus.
That's an Naboo blaster from episode 1.
Thank you.
And there's a blown apart X-Wing model, which is kind of cool. From a lot of the shots they had to do pyrotechnics and A New Hope, and so some of the X-Wings are just left in parts. So that's one of the ones from the...
And I like the way they displayed this. It looks like it just broke apart right there.
And that's a Joe Johnston above it, isn't it? That's an original storyboard, drawn by Joe. That's one of those sequences as well, which is cool. And
I'm a big fan of that too. I do a lot of this display work at work and all that, but finding a nice image to go with your piece, displaying it cleanly, not a lot of photos. Some people overdo, hundreds of photos around. For me, one really nice image displayed alongside a piece can do really well. Here's another great example of a screen match. This is Paul Blake's Greedo mask from the original shots of the Cantina. What's neat is the Greedo masks, the dots on the head, the bumps were added by hand. So they made 4 different Greedo heads at least for the first film, and each one of them, the bumps are different. So you can go back later and look and say, yep, this is that one, this is this one. That's some original Yoda material, which is pretty outstanding to see anywhere. This is a really cool piece, and Brandon knows the story behind it.
Well, I can tell you on the left, you're looking at the backpack. Mark Hamill carried Yoda around in. I think it has some access flaps where you can basically get a hand in to puppeteer the thing, where Frank Oz could. Sitting in that is a stand-in Yoda, which they would use for lining up shots, blocking. And then on the right, you've got a picture of different molds for Yoda's lip. So I guess one of the things with Yoda is they weren't totally happy with the way the lip was originally sculpted. So they went back and did a new lip sculpt that was more similar to Albert Einstein's. And there's about 6 different choices there, and one was a winner.
So this is why Brandon knows a lot about the bunker. That is a youngish Brandon.
This is something that Gus and I went and found in Smith River, California, where they built the set and shot that part of the film. And basically, one of the guys who was working on it, one of the Fern brothers, they call themselves, had taken home a number of these fiberglass panels because he thought they would build a good fence in his backyard. So he nailed them into this, wooden frame, and there was his fence for 25 years. And then Gus and I went and bought him a new fence.
So who was it that asked how you get props? You buy a guy a fence.
Yeah. So those are off the side of it. Those are the side where it was sort of built into the hill there.
So, anybody have a question now? We'll do 1 or 2. All right, I think Han Solo's hand went up first, and then the fellow with the camera in front of you.
When you compare the price differences of the props from the original 3 movies to the later 3 movies, what's the price difference?
The question was, what's the difference in value and price between original trilogy and prequel trilogy? Gus?
I think, it really depends on the piece. I mean, granted, obviously the original trilogy is older, and for many people has this, special place versus the prequel trilogy. But things like lightsabers or helmets or costume pieces from the prequel trilogy can sell for a lot more sometimes than original trilogy pieces. So it does vary. I mean, in general, original trilogy items are more, but it's not a rule that applies in all cases.
And just very briefly, I'll just say a lot of that's to do with the fact that people who are collecting the original trilogy material are at an age where they have perhaps high disposable income, basically. Kids who are growing up right now with the prequels in time may well want to buy into the prequel material, which is where we'll see an elevation in their values as well. And there's scarcity. I mean, we're talking about with the original films, they're 30 years old. You know, there's not so much of this stuff around. The prequels are more recent, and
you know, material made for them just in general.
Yeah, absolutely.
You there, Kat?
Hi. For that C-3PO head, you mentioned that you acquired from the Steve Sansweet collection. If that's in yours, Tom Spina now, was that a trade you did with him? Was it
That's actually
purchased?
yeah.
And if it was purchased, how much was
Well, and the question was about the Steve Sansweet piece. That's not in my personal collection. That's actually in the prop store collection, and I'll leave it to them to politely decline.
It was just a long conversation with Steve over a long time, and it was just a negotiation. And Steve was really looking to change what he was doing with his collection, and we've all seen a phenomenal setup and display that he's got here. And what he wanted to do was reinvest in his collection, and he's built an extension to the whole museum. And it was a question of timing really with him. How much I paid for it is just between myself and Steve, really.
So let's move on to the next one. Oh yeah, all right. So we've got a